we're going to start this discussion off this morning. Um, and I want to ask you, what inspired you to write this book?
Well, a friend. I have to tell you, a friend. There's two answers to it, but I'll give you the first one. Um, I had a friend in Dallas who knew my writing and who was head of a foundation that had artist residencies out in West Texas. And she and her husband, who ran this foundation, had me out to that artist residency one summer to work on a book. And I discovered out there that the husband, Dick Bartlett, who's no longer with us, was from Florida. And we started talking. And he had a library there at this residency that was all environmental. It was a sort of environmental residency. Everybody out there, one person at a time, was working on some kind of environmental project. I was doing that. He had all of Rawlings in his environmental library. He had every book she ever wrote, and you know, writings about her, and I commented on it, and we started talking about Florida. He grew up in Florida near where I grew up. He went to UF. Um, so we hit it off. Some time passed. He passed, and his widow, living in Dallas, emailed me one night, and she said, I think there needs to be a biography of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, and you're the one to write it. I went, whoa. I was teaching full time at the University of North Texas then, and wanting to write full time, as many writing teachers do. And I took her up on the notion, I contacted Flo. I said, here, it looks like all the archival material is at this one place, and this nice Flo Turcotte says, come on over. It's one-stop shopping here. So, long story short, my friend Joanne Bartlett, her foundation, decided that Marjorie's life fell under the mission of their foundation, and they funded me for several years to work on the book full time. That's I praise her at the beginning of any talk, Joanne Bartlett, who also died in the middle of the project, and the book is dedicated to her and her husband, Dick. Um, the the other inspiration, which was lying there all the time before I ever met the Bartletts, was having been read The Yearling to me as a fourth grader. My fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Chapman at McNabb Elementary School in Pompano Beach, read The Yearling to our class very slowly after lunch every day, a few pages, until the end of the year. And I never forgot it. That was an elementary school full of Yankee transplants like I was. And she was a real Floridian, and her accent was lovely and expressed that book so well to us. So there you have two things: one from the way back past, and one from more recent times where I suppose an idea was presented and was ready to take flight.
Oh,
So,
great. What you learned when you were writing the book?
what I learned, well, I learned everything. I knew almost nothing about Marjorie. I had read the previous biography by Elizabeth Silverthorne some years back, but mostly I loved her work, and I didn't know much about her. And for me, with any inquiry, the work has to pull me in as much, if not more, than the person. So I learned about Marjorie. I learned about her temperament. I learned how much she wanted to write, and continued to improve her writing, her art, I must say. She inspired me as a writer, the way she kept going and criticizing her own work and making it better, and that intrigued me. Of course, I learned about her whole life, birth to, from beginning to end. I learned how complicated she was. I learned how human she was. This was a lot of it. Her character came out in letters, and Flo Turcotte can attest to this in more than 4,000 letters that I read, and I quoted from those that did the best job of telling her story. But she was I don't know. She was an individual who would sustain my interest over years. Not every subject will sustain a writer. She sustained me. I miss her. What can I say?
Uh, what surprised you most when you were
Hmm.
writing this book about her? I mean, I know from your association with the Rawlings Society and all, over the years, but in knowing about her, in the work, the Pulitzer, the Yearling, but what personally, as you were discovering her and living with her on a daily
Mhm.
basis,
Yes,
what
yes.
surprised you?
Yeah. Um, I suppose I could say her drinking problem surprised me. I'd heard hints of it. It was almost like we don't talk about this. And then once once I got into the correspondence, and not just hers, but people writing to her or about her, I realized that there really had been a habit that she found it practically impossible to break. And so that surprised me. It made her a richer character. There were many times, and Flo can attest to this, where I, I would read that she had been working really well, and then, she stopped and she drank too much for a week or something, and I'd go, "Oh, Marge, oh, Marge." Maybe what surprised me most was how emotionally involved I got. In learning her, I said, "Stop it. Just stop it. Get back to your work, Marjorie." So that surprised me, but then I'm just telling you now, my emotional reaction to her life also surprised me. I was completely pulled in. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that can make it that's a challenge for a biographer. I've written two others, and when you get
It's okay.
involved with your character, which you must, there must be some kind of falling in love with whoever you're writing about to keep going with them and to dig deeper. And so it was a good thing. It was a good thing that I was involved. But you also have to pull back and say, okay, what happened? What happened? How did it happen? Um, I, I, I'm invested, but I can't be so invested that I change her character or I eliminate truths about her. I have to tell the story. So there's a little dance one does with oneself in the writing.
Okay. One that I've wanted to know from day one, and I said I was going to grab you at the society meeting in May.
Yeah.
Um, what does the title really mean? The title of the book.
It's actually a quote from Marjorie. I can't remember exactly where it is, but she's explaining to someone in a letter about how it's more important to live the life one wishes to live and go down with it rather than what's implied, live somebody else's life or live a life that someone else wants you to live. It's her phrase. And when I was writing the book proposal, my agent caught it. My agent was reading the proposal and sending back comments, and she said, "There's your title. There's your title." So it's Marjorie's words, and someone else spotted them as the perfect title.
Oh my
Yeah.
word.
Yeah.
Um, Give us an interesting fun fact about the book that maybe we might not have, I'm all about fun. And Archie was too, by the way. Okay,
Yes, she was. Yes, she was.
what was an interesting fun fact about this book that you kind of located that just went, aha, you know.
Okay, that's easy. There were many, but one I've written about. It's going to be in the next Rawlings journal, actually. When I was first looking at some of the letters published to her from others, I came across a few letters from someone named Norman Berg. And he was identified as a book representative in this collection of letters. And I kept reading the exchanges between them in this volume, and I thought, there's something here there's a tone that's a little more than just platonic. There's an affection between these two people, but it's not recognized anywhere, Marjorie and Norman. And I said this to Flo. I said, I think like a love affair or something like that? And she said, maybe, no. And I said, no, I'm after this. And so I found I found much more correspondence, and much of it right there in the archive. But I also went to Norman Berg's archive at the University of Georgia in Athens. He was indeed a book representative for Macmillan. He was sent to Atlanta in the 30s to get Southern talent that they were discovering. And they met at some point and they became very close. And it was, as he put it later, a platonic love. But between the two of them, over many years, the correspondence is very rich. They fought and they made up. They gave each other advice and rejected it or accepted it. At one point, there is a hint that perhaps he proposed marriage to her in between her marriages. And he gave to her the gift of a shotgun engraved with scenes from The Yearling on it. And how I tracked down the shotgun and that story is too long to explain here. But it took me several months, and after this story, and Flo started calling me the no, I started signing myself as the love child because I was so after this love story, and it was a love story, a very, very deep friendship. And after Marjorie's wonderful editor, Maxwell Perkins, passed away, and she was gunning on her last novel, The Sojourner, Norman Berg stepped in and played the role of Max. He wasn't a Max. He was not gentle. He could boss her around and then pull back, but he did kind of coach her through that last novel, if you will. So just the hint of a deeper than business friendship that I saw in those letters led to really uncovering a major friendship that lasted all of her life, professional life. Yeah.
That was that was probably, I've known people that do research and
Hmm.
as a librarian, and when they have those type of that they've picked up on something that no one else
Yes.
has found or discovered, it is really so rich. I can imagine how you felt.
It
Um,
was, I was going to say, add one more thing, that in the course of that, uncovering that story, I was able to speak to Norman Berg's granddaughter, who had met Marjorie as a child, and two of his professional associates in the book business who remembered a lot. So I had living people as well as the correspondence. That made it,
wow.
yeah, really wonderful. So,
Oh, but one person that you wish that you could have interviewed for this book that perhaps you were not able to, that would have maybe given you some insight or you know
mhm.
just you know what I'm asking. Give me the dirt, okay?
Hey, yeah, well, I can name three right off the bat. And of course, there weren't that many when I was working on it. There weren't that many folks living who remembered her, and some of them are gone in just the last 3, 4 years. Um, of course, I wish I had interviewed Norman Berg. I would love it if he were just sitting in my living room here today with a drink. That would be great. I wish I could have spoken to Idella. That would be, that would be super. I used her memoir. I consulted her memoir, but her let me say this as a biographer. When you have a memoir of someone looking back over 20 or 30 years, that would include my own, and an account of something written at the time of an event describing it, you have to the contemporary account gets higher points than the memoir because our memories are all, eh, you know, they pick and choose our memories, and our memories are often not accurate. And so I would like Idella right now or right then to speak to face, to speak about her memories and her memoir and string out some of the stories. Yeah.
just a follow-up question on that. On her tombstone, her family put that, the most perfect maid, the
Mhm,
inscription.
mhm.
Do you think she would have approved of that?
I don't know Idella as well as I know Marjorie. I think I'm going to sidestep that. I uh, I don't know. Maybe not.
Uh-huh. I
Maybe not.
just,
That's
from what conversations, past conversations, other
mm,
things that we've heard at the society, interviews and this thing, they had kind of, to me, and if you would address that relationship, that I would love it. The,
okay.
because I think it's inherent to lots of things in her life.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, Idella deserves something more than the perfect maid is a title. I mean, it's become a title. Um, uh, it was a difficult relationship. Adela was a smart lady, and she saw Marjorie as she was, and she could call her on stuff, and she could also help her, and she was perfect in the sense that she was the one who stuck with her the longest, stuck with Marjorie the longest, on and off. There were times when she understandably left. But now I'm getting confused with what I'm saying. Um, she, uh, she stuck with her. She was a stalwart friend. She was a friend, and I believe, should have gotten more credit for that, for the
Mhm.
friendship. Yeah.
Well, and let's move on in that vein with the people in the community that
Hmm.
stuck with her.
Yes.
And also, if you could touch on, because I want to say about Marjorie, the coming of age that a lot of people in the South that are become liberal in their thinking and with
Hmm.
race relations was
Hmm.
that was very interesting to me because of of how you showed how she developed. So
Yes.
could you touch on that a little bit,
You
please?
bet. You bet. One of my fears in going into this project and realizing how many black employees she had on the grounds, and the basic relationship between blacks and whites in Florida at that time. I thought this is going to be tricky, and I knew that the N word was used in more than one book, and I thought, oh gosh, how am I going to handle this? And two things helped. One was, of course, discovering that Marjorie had made a friendship with Zora Neale Hurston, and from that, then the come to Jesus moment, if you will, is the way I put it, occurred. Like, here is a woman of color who is my literary equal. Okay, what else am I missing here? And it's chronicled in, luckily for the biographer, chronicled in her correspondence with Norton Baskin, because he was in India at the time this was all happening, or shortly after he went to India, and she tells him in her letters how she's realized um, what she's a racist, and how is she going to change this in herself. So she goes through a couple of years of sort of making strides and then stepping back. And as anyone making a major change does, it's not a straight line. I was so relieved to see that, both as a human being and also as a writer. I didn't want the book to end with her as a as a dug-in racist. I wanted to see that development, just as I saw development in her writing. This human being moves forward and out. So that was it was a delight, actually, and a relief, if you will, to see that she came to be an outspoken supporter of equal rights and defending individuals in her community. At the time I was putting this together, I was also just uncomfortable. Like, how am I going to chart this? How am I going to how am I going to do this in writing? And I had a residency at an artist colony here in Wyoming, Ucross, and there was uh, an African American poet. Um, she was actually from Africa originally, and she was there. There were just eight of us there at the dinner table one night, and I told her, I said, "Here's my situation. Here's the material I have. Um, I, I feel uncomfortable or awkward. How am I going to put it out there?" And she looked at me and she said, "Just tell what happened." Okay, thank you. Yep. So I did. I told what happened. That's all. It happened. Happened the way I wrote it.
And made
Yep.
no opinions about it in your writing. Just
Right.
told it. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Which we wish that could happen in this world today. Tell what happens,
Yep.
don't have talking heads.
Yep.
What is one thing you wish you could have found out in researching this book that perhaps you didn't, other than the Norman Berg? Was there any other situation?
Mhm. I think if I'd had a little more time, writers have deadlines, and I did move mine. I asked for extra months. When I got into Norman Berg, I thought, oh, I might need a little more time. But there are deadlines. Had I had a little more time, I might have tried to track down more correspondence from Marjorie to other people. There's plenty from people to Marjorie in her archive, but she wrote to other people, and I did make inquiries and did get some letters. A couple of Hemingway letters, a few other people that she corresponded with. I was able to get copies from the various archives around the country who held these. There's probably a list of 5 or 7 or 8 other people she wrote. I would like to find out. Some of these people didn't have archives. I learned that. Um, the project could have gone on, but the story, I had the story. I had the story.
Now, I think several of us around this table, perhaps,
Mm,
would love to be at one time, tell a story and be an author and
mm,
really research. And I want to kind of focus now on this next set of questions into that type of thing. We've all read about Marjorie, and hopefully everybody's read the book. And we're going to come and hopefully we can have some questions from the audience in a minute. But I
great.
want to focus on what this, God, and this was a book, from beginning to end and of lots of stuff. I mean, about this author's life where you could get a really good picture of her.
Yeah.
What do you, and I'm sure you're going to tell your class this afternoon that you're teaching on, writing biographies, but tell us what special knowledge or what kind of research ability do you have to do something that is really this comprehensive?
Well, I think you have to be kind of a nerd. I have not applied that word to myself until very lately. But I have to keep wanting to find out more, wanting to find out more. Okay, here's this. How did this happen? How did this person get into the picture? If she said this, why did she say that? It's a matter of just wanting to know, wanting to know. And so if that basic impulse is there, then you start digging. And so there, I guess there has to be a flaw in your personality. I don't know. Maybe Flo can speak to that. Flo, who has become a dear friend over this this long project, and without whom this book would never have come to press. So there's that impulse to learn and to find out. Um, what else does it take? It takes time. It takes a schedule. Writing full time, just for myself, I would do 3 days on, 1 day off, 4 days on, 1 day off. I was living by myself with 2 dogs and just with no one else to answer to except them. And so I developed this schedule and of working in the morning until 2 or 3 in the afternoon and then done. Some nights then getting curious about something that I ended up back at the computer late at night, but mostly sort of a 9 to 3 schedule. It's a job. It's a full-time job. Full-time job. Always in my head. Always going at it.
Well, we do know that it would have been really great if you could have Googled everything, as we were laughing about at the beginning. And I'm sure that, but what research methods uh, have been most fruitful to you in this process?
Mm. Well, certainly spending many hours, many days, if you add it up, it's probably months at Smathers Library, um, going through materials, reading, taking notes. Um, I early on, I had a research assistant in Celine Hickey, who is Flo's daughter, and so when I was away from Smathers, I could email Celine and say, "Can you make copies of such and such?" And she would send copies of letters or things that I hadn't made copies of while I was there. So I had a research assistant there. But also, as my research expanded, I needed trips to University of Georgia in Athens, their archive, University of South Carolina. Um, I I had a research assistant at the University of Louisville because, as you know, Marjorie worked in Louisville for a while, a short time, but there were materials there, and the Louisville Courier Journal editor also helped me. This is all long distance. I went to Rochester, New York, where Marjorie had lived for some time, and discovered in in the Monroe County Library archive there all the old microfilms of the newspapers she wrote for when she lived there, and discovered a whole lot of feature writing she had done that hadn't come to light. So I was there in Rochester for a week, and there was so much material I had to hire an assistant there to finish my job after I left Rochester. Went to Washington, D.C. To see her home, both homes, the one where she was born in Brooklyn, which was a suburb of D.C., and then later when she and her family moved into the city. Um, I didn't have a research assistant there, but I had a wonderful compatriot in Bob Molesky, who was a retired NPR reporter and lives in the Brooklyn neighborhood and knows everything about Brookland and Marjorie's residences and what her father did as a civil community servant. I mean, Bob Molesky, I love you. We're still in touch. He's contributing to the Marjorie Journal this next month. Um, and I went to Maine for about 8 months, mainly because I have family there and I thought it would be nice to write. But also I looked for Chuck Rawlings's grave, since it turned out that he settled about 20 miles from where I was living that summer. And
Oh my
I
word.
found nothing. I found nothing, but I could say that was part of my research. And then I also went to Marjorie's last home in Van Hornsville, New York, and met the current owner. And Flo was on that trip. Flo came up with Helen Warren, and we made that trip. And as we went up the hill to that house, I thought, my goodness, here's the setting of the farm and the Sojourner. Um, I don't know if it was or not, but I had pictured a certain farm in the Sojourner, and it seemed we were approaching it. So the farmhouse, anyway. So I
Well,
think that's close to what traveling. I'm traveling to archives, to places, and to speak to people. Atlanta's another place, but I think that's it.
well, this is just an aside for me, and since I'm doing it, I get this freebie.
Of course.
We we went to the Van Horn. We've been up into upper state New York and
Uh,
seen the house and everything,
mm,
travel. I was just there's not been a lot written about her relationship with the Van. Maybe there is, and I haven't read it with the Van Horns. He was quite. I mean, wasn't he chairman of the like General Electric? He was a an absolute confidant to presidents. Is he the one I'm thinking about?
yes, and
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 I would love someone, hey Ann, or somebody to that relationship is and with the wife, that was a They
Yes.
were, I think they were trying to keep her on the straight and narrow when they could, it seems like to me. But that's a relationship that I would love to hear more about.
That was, you're right, they did do their best. That was another archive I was in touch with, in fact, to see.
He was
Uh,
a powerhouse.
yes, he was. And there was not, that library sent me everything they had, but there was very little.
Very
Uh,
little.
yep, there was very little I
His
could do.
name was Owen Young, Sandy, not.
Young, thank you. Thank you.
Right.
Thank
Thanks, Flo.
thank you.
Yep.
I couldn't remember. Thank you so much.
And I also wanted to interject that we went to the Crescent Beach House for a couple of times and got the real Marjorie vibe there as well.
We did. We did. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so let's just kind of move on. Little personal things. Um, what was something you ended up cutting from the book?
That's easy. That's easy. And it won't be very, it's not very glamorous. When I turned in the manuscript in April 2019, the editor read it and she wrote back and she said, this is great. I just think the last five or so chapters need to be more focused. So, okay, everything up to the last five chapters as is, fine. So, but I went back and looked at those chapters and I saw what I had done, or how I could make them more focused, is that I had gotten very interested in everything Marjorie read. Um, that's a key to somebody's character. What are they reading? Well, their interests, and I popped those in wherever I could, when they made sense in the narrative. But toward the end of the book, I had been adding titles and conversations with Norman Berg about books, and I found that fascinating. And I went back to those chapters of it. We don't need all this. She never told me what it needed, my editor. She said it just needs to be more focused. I looked and I got it. And so I trimmed some of that book stuff, book interest stuff, out. And
Out of
that,
it.
yep, that was
Out of
it.
it. Okay, just from a school librarian and Kathy and I, lover of books for kids. Um, question.
Sure.
What book from your childhood do you think shaped you as a writer?
That is really, there's no one book.
Give me
There
a
can't
few.
possibly. But what I remember about checking out books as an elementary school kid, uh, is I got really entranced by a series of biographies for young adults or children, and everyone of my age who I mentioned who
Landmark.
remember, they were turquoise
Mhm.
binding with red letters, and
Absolutely.
I checked those darn things out, every one of them more than once, and never thought of myself as someone interested in biography or writing one. But I look back and I see those are the stories that entrance, especially the stories about women, I have to say, like Marie Curie, um, or, uh, anyway.
And there
So,
was a new one that came out like once a month. And in your library, there was, and I want to say it was Landmark, but the Sacagawea, I know the ones you're talking about. I read them too. They're wonderful.
yeah.
What you kind of hit on it, but I want to just touch on it too. Um, what aspect of your writing do you think has improved over time? Because you've written many books, and and
Yeah.
the one, your Florida one, is the one I'm anxious to read next. Okay. How do you think that that your writing has improved over the times with this?
Uh, hmm. That might be for someone else to say. Um, Perhaps it's become more economical. I look back at some of my I started as a music critic, sort of an accidental job, because I was trained as a musician first, and then I was a classical musician, and then one night I was asked to review a concert, and then it just started there. But I look back at some of those early reviews, and I see that some sentences were longer than they needed to be, or I strung together ideas with a bunch of prepositional phrases, that sentence could have been collapsed in more I had more punch in it had I not written that way. That's one thing I can point to that's specific. Um,
And I would like, I've got one more question, but
Sure.
before, and then I think we may have time for some questions from the audience. But Anne, it's a personal flavor to me. Can you, I know you've got the book, right?
um,
Okay.
this,
Can you turn,
yep.
all right, you got your book. Can you turn to page 352?
Okay. I opened right to it. I opened right to it. Okay.
I want to show you. This is how much I love this book. Y'all can see it's all. I didn't write in it. You know, we just can't write in books and underline, you know, so I had to use these post-it notes. Would you read for me and for everybody, because I think it's just so apropos. Would you read that first section from the notes for a talk that Marjorie wrote? It's the beginning of that whole little part from I choose down to stirred him. You see what I'm talking about?
No, I have 352, you said?
No, this was, hang on, I've got the line. This was 354, I think. Is that right, Freddie? 354. 354. It's the beginning of the chapter, Legacy.
Legacy, sure.
Okay,
So,
would you read that underneath from I choose down to stir him? This is from her notes for a talk that you found, which I think is beautiful.
yes.
Relativity of beauty. And then I would like for you to comment on this after you've read it. Okay, y'all are in for a treat. So listen.
You sure are. We'll see. I choose to call beauty anything that stirs an emotional reaction to such an extent that you're conscious of the spiritual excitement over and above the sensory perception. You see the leeway that definition gives me. It means that beauty is not absolute, but is distinctly relative, and that what fails to stir me may constitute beauty for you. It means, too, that beauty is more valid, more important, more trustworthy than truth. Because while we cannot be sure of truth, we know with our own minds and senses when we are aesthetically or spiritually stirred and by what. The artist is one who tries to share, by giving it concrete expression, the particular form of beauty that has stirred him. It is beautiful, isn't it?
Would you comment on that, please, and why you chose it?
I chose it because the idea of beauty comes back all the time in her writing, whether it's in public talks, like these notes were intended for, or in her writing about, especially about Florida. She is continually evoking the beauty of place, the beauty of character, beauty of appearances, people, animals. She seems always in love with the world in some sense, and pulls the beauty out for us to see. So I respond to that because I love it, and I love beauty too. Maybe all of us do. We're looking for it. We see it in things. I'm looking outside at my front yard, which is covered with snow, and it's beautiful in the sun. And you may be looking at sand, but the reflection of the light on the land, on the grass, on the snow, the sand. Is very special. She had a wonderful eye. I will say that. She had a wonderful eye. So,
Oh, Anne, thank you. And one last from your interviewer. Okay. How does your faith or your ethical outlook inform your writing?
that's complicated.
I know.
Part of it just came from what I said about beauty. But as for writing, I'd like to take it in a slightly different angle. But I'm answering your question. When I sat down to explore Marjorie's life and to write about her, I felt my job, aside from all the love of research and the love of her work and so on, was to render her as as fully a human being as she was. And there is an aspect of service to that. I felt and still feel, if there's another book, and I've felt this for anything I've written, is that I'm serving something greater than myself. I'm serving this life. How can I best serve Marjorie's life? How can I best serve whatever my next subject is in writing? And so that's an aspect of faith. It's a humility. I've been lucky enough to be given this job to write about this woman's life. She's not here. She's not here, but there's this stuff I can use. How can I best serve her for others?
Oh, Anne, thank you.